Hello everybody, welcome back. We did an overview of the Everworld series for everyone, and now we're doing 2 videos talking about the books a little bit one by one in a manner that is for people to know what the heck we're talking about. Like, we're not going to describe each plot, but if you've read these before and want to hear what we think about them, go ahead and check this out, and we'd love to hear, of course, what you think below. Moving on to the next one, now we are finally really involved with Olympus and the gods and all their pettiness and their infighting, and the characters becoming, I think in this one in particular, especially Davidius, the general, is when they really start taking the reins of, we are a part of this conflict, we are an essential part of this conflict. The way these gods are handling this conflict and being their own separate little petty things is getting knocked down one by one is not working. We need to take the reins. I think this is where they really start to get that mentality.
Well, and I think this is also the first book where you really see, I think that they understand that, like, these aren't, like, omniscient gods that, like when you think of a god, like, they know everything. They're, like, these gods are scared. You see that they are limited by their immortality, that, like, this is as far as I can evolve as a human.
Yeah, they're
like, as a person.
They're superpowers and magic, but they are still just beings.
Yeah, they are still beings, and they're almost more limited than mortals. And you see that yearning that some of them have to be mortal, to be able to go beyond what, like, Athena just, she really has that.
Yeah, most of them, the gods, the problem is that they found a place that they're comfortable in, and it's just an endless cycle for hundreds of thousands of years, just like, this is how things are, and things never evolve or change, or like, this is my mindset, this is how reality is. And since they can't do that, that's been kind of the Achilles heel for a lot of them to get in.
And I think that made the gods much more, like, personable almost, because you kind of could empathize with, like, they can't get any better than they are. They can't evolve beyond that. They can't think beyond that. And that's just what they're stuck in, and they're kind of destroying their entire world because of that. And I think this did a really good job. And I mean, it's Greek. It's Greek. There's always Greek.
Yes,
it's in everything.
Always, it gets in.
But I think it did it in a way that was much more palatable.
Yeah, and now they're more involved. Then we start seeing more of the ramifications of their involvement, even from stuff early on. Like, 'cause before then, it's more just, we're just trying to survive, and not really seeing the big picture of changes that we're making along the way. Things we're introducing to this world are having a big effect. And you get a lot of, that chemistry book, like, now they're making weapons and, like, super weapons.
Yeah, I mean, I think, because at the very end of the last book, we made a deal with the Kuhatch, and where this one was interesting in the same way the Aztec one was, because it was much more exotic for me as an American teenager.
Yeah, something that's, like, not as commonplace.
It dealt with some gods that I'd never heard of before, and it has more of the sci-fi, the Kuhatch, and everyone's making deals, and it seems much more adult in that way, that it's not just a straightforward plot. This is what's going to happen, and then we go here, and then we do this, and you kind of also start to see how Everworld was put together by the gods, that they use the metaphor of, like, a quilt, that they literally brought a square, and then somebody just stitched it together, and you can be walking, and it's like Greek atmosphere, and
Greek
like
square,
it's very Mediterranean,
square.
and then all of a sudden you're in Africa, and it's just like, what is happening?
This one is, I think, the best one, along with the one with Hell, is for atmosphere, like I was talking about, the way it's portrayed, especially because it's something so different, and it was handled in a respectful, like, creative way.
Well, I love that a lot of the gods, just, like, you're not going to see them. You're basically seeing their version of their demigods, and just, like, they don't even want to talk to you, because they're so far above you. And I think that was interesting, that all they wanted was a sacrifice. That's all they wanted.
Yeah.
And you see more of Senna and her limitations, and you learn a little bit more about witches.
Well, her limitations, and also her growth since she's been here. Like, she is in the sea, realized now that she's in the same boat as everyone else, where she's not actually quite sure who she is and, like, what her place is. She has an idea and a goal, but she's growing into it the way they all are. And then this is the one they end up in Egypt, right?
Yes.
They blow up the
They blow up Sobek dam,
Yeah,
keeping
blow up the dam, and then they find that the Amazons have taken over.
This is my version. You can see the tape.
The Amazons have taken over Egypt, and the Amazons are hilarious. This is one of the funnier ones.
Yeah, but this one, I feel like this is when things started to become really, really interesting, because especially, like, as a preteen, like, oh my gosh, what's Senna doing? What's she up to? And as an adult, like, I feel like as a kid you don't realize like Senna is just a teenage girl.
Yeah.
And like she's making poor decisions and
Well,
she's
and
doing.
you finally have her mother, which is a thing, a string we haven't really talked about, is like, what's her involvement really? What did she set up? And her mother's involvement was a little disappointing for me though, overall. I feel like she wasn't, because I think she was built up in the mind of the characters and then as a reader as this big mysterious character.
But I think as an adult I really appreciated her mother because
Yeah.
she was so real.
Yeah.
But like, oh wow, this really powerful witch. But it's like how you think of your parents as a kid and then going to adulthood, that you realize that your parents are infallible. They do have a lot of vices, they do have problems, and they're not all they're not all knowing, they're not, and I think as an adult this book resonates more than any of the other ones because you realize these are just kids and like they're dealing with adult problems and they're trying to figure out their way in the world.
Yeah.
And this was just so sad as an adult reading this about Senna. Like, oh, so
it's also,
sad.
in rethinking about these, having myself read them for the first time, you read these as a kid, I did not. From this point on is where it starts to show its cracks and like start to crumble towards the end.
Well,
like,
I think
this is the last real strong one. I think maybe that's
around here is where she started getting feedback that like you might need to end this.
Yeah, put your focus on Animorphs.
And I think she was getting more money from Animorphs at this point. Maybe this is when Fox made the deal, and you can really tell there was a lot less. Like she's still into it, but she's distracted. She's not as into it.
Yeah, because it starts to go down in quality here for me.
Yeah,
I think when they introduce Poseidon, and I always find it weird when they
put both.
Yeah, when they do.
I don't know.
I don't know. I never like it when, like, because the Roman versions of the gods, they are the Greek gods under a different name, but when they make them two entirely separate people and like they're at odds, it's like kind of a weird dynamic. But I think they explain that
because in the third book, they say like Galahad had the same memories as one of the other knights.
Yeah.
Because in mythology, sometimes they were interchangeable.
Yeah.
So they were having the same thoughts.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
I think it depends on the mythology of how separate they are.
I think maybe it was just the way it was handled. Like this one, this was not a favorite of mine. It didn't.
No, this was, but
could have done more with like the mermaid stuff.
I think she was using plot devices that she was going to put in when she really cared about it.
Yeah.
Because the Frenchman.
Yeah.
In Atlantis, that was really cool. But that should have been better.
He's one of the characters, and then also like the god who's left in our world. Like there is actually he's another one of those that like feels like they were built up to be a central part later on. They never really used.
But that's why I feel like she had these ideas, and then by the time it was time to implement them, she didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
And so you're never going to hear about him again. It doesn't matter. He's like a throwaway character, but he should be so much more interesting and so much more important.
Yeah.
And I feel like if this was a 20-book series, which is what I think she originally intended, you would have come back to Atlantis, and it would have been more important. But
and this one I feel is a step a little bit back in the right direction because they introduced so many fascinating things. Like they reach like one of the more interesting places. This is where you have the real build up with Senna and the Senites, basically her bunch of neo-Nazis that she's pulling from our world into the Everworld, and there's a real big kind of conclusion to a lot of things, but also building up to all that's left is the main villain, the main focus. Like
I think
this gets it to the point. This was the last section.
The biggest amount of character growth for all of the characters.
Yes, in one thing.
Because you really start to see. April, this is the role I'm going to take in Everworld. Jalil, this is what I'm going to do. Christopher, this is what I'm going to do. David, this is my role. Even Senna, this is the direction I'm going in. And I feel like in this book, they all decided this is the role I will play, and like it really ramps up. All the stakes are laid out on the table. You're starting to see everything
fading from the real world as well. This is where that kind of starts to come into play.
I do believe very much so that she knew before she finished this book that she was ending it. And I think what happened at the end of the book with Senna would not have happened in this book had that. I think the Senites would have continued. This would have gone on much longer, and I think they would have somehow gotten away. But Senna's fate would not have happened in this book had she not already decided this was ending. I think that was a rushed thing, and I think they never really like deal with it the way that they should, especially April. And I think like that's what, like, it was awesome and it was cool and everything was like so crazy, but I think it was rushed, and I think it was rushed because she knew this was the end.
Yeah.
And that was really upsetting.
Yeah.
As an adult reading this back, just like I could finally see what she was doing.
Her mentality and how she was,
Like, I loved this, but this was one of my favorite ones. And I think because as a kid, like, wow, things are getting real. Like, what's going to happen? Like, is the character who died even actually dead? Like, will she come back? What's going to happen? And then as an adult, you realize, like, she was just phoning it in at this point, and this was
really,
the end.
yeah, a short phone call that phone in was. And this last book, this is just the wrap up.
I don't even like looking at this. Just
this is
makes
like,
me angry.
if any of you have seen the old Chappelle Show skit where they have the alarm when things are just taking too long to wrap it up. Just wrap it up. Just that's what this is. It's just a rush through to the end, and it's frustrating because it literally gets to the point like this. You've had. And especially think of it from the perspective of like a 13-year-old reading. You've had this long journey and this whole build-up, and it's kind of like you're getting ready to establish the big final conflict with the big bad at the heart of everything, and it happens like off-screen. Like, it doesn't actually happen. It's like they get ready for the final conflict, and you're like, oh, it's building up. The final conflict is going to be here. It's going to be an all-out, like, it's going to involve every part of Everworld that's left, and it's going to be this crazy thing. And you're like, wait a minute. There's like 10 pages left.
And everyone's still divided, and everyone hates each other, and what are you going to do?
It doesn't. It just fizzles out to like a nothing ending.
Well, and it just, like, none of it was believable because, like,
yeah.
Now we're all going to get along and work together, and it was
we're
not
gonna
earned.
break into hell, and we're gonna free Thor and Baldur, and we're getting ready for the final battle. And it's over. Wait, but it didn't happen. Yeah, but it did. We just didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's fine. Everything's going to work out. But I was so excited for it, even knowing it was going to be the end, because, like, she's obviously going to do it right, and I thought it would be twice as long. Yeah. I was so, like, okay, it's going to be okay. And we came up with another title, Finalize the Finale. There should have been a 13th one that actually finished it, because it doesn't even finish, and you don't even see Connor. No one's anywhere near Connor.
This is like it's like playing Final Fantasy VII, and you get to the fight against Sephiroth, and then screen turns black. None of that ever happens, and the credits start rolling, and just on the side they go, oh yeah, we won, and this thing happened to the planet. And that's it. Wait,
but they don't even actually say that
they
fought
all the details.
Connor
Yeah,
and
it's just
won.
kind of.
They just say, now we have the people we need to fight Connor, which isn't true, because they're just like two extra gods. Like, what are you gonna do? But everything about it just is so frustrating, and I was so angry.
It's a limp ending.
It's not even just, it just makes me angry. Like, everything about it, and just her indifference to it. Like, to me, like, up until this point, like, authors were like these, like, sacred beings. They were like these, like, great, powerful people. And
this is the first time it's like, oh, they're just people trying to make a living. Like,
well, and I didn't even, like, as an adult, I understand that now. Yeah. I get that. But, like, as a kid, it was like this, like, a library was like this sacred place. It was like a beautiful, beautiful place. And, like, authors would take care of you. They, like, take you on this journey. And, like, this was the first time when, like, the book series just ended, but it didn't end. And it wasn't even that I just didn't like the ending. It just didn't end.
Yeah.
And that was so upsetting. And I was so sad. And it just makes me, like, I didn't like Animorphs before, but I hate Animorphs. I hate it. I hate it.
It's like people that hated the PS2 because it killed the Dreamcast. Like, it's like, it doesn't mean it's a horrible thing. It's just there's this, you have a negative.
Yeah, I can't even look at an Animorphs book without getting angry. Like, I just can't. I can't. But this was one of my favorite series as a preteen. I loved it. And I like it as an adult reading it. This was a much better journey, knowing the end, knowing what I was getting myself into. What did you feel as an adult?
Well, I mean, as an adult, it's like when we read the Goosebumps and Dead Time stories. Like, I was rereading them, not from the perspective of, oh, I'm in my mid-30s reading these, I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of when I was the age when these were coming out. You know what I mean? Like, and from that perspective, and being like, all right, well, who was I at that time? You know, how was I thinking? What was I reading? And from that perspective, they were fantastic up till they get towards the end. But also being in that mindset, I think, made the ending, even though you told me about how it was, like, you know, just didn't really end. And how
I remember
upset
you reading the last one, and like
was,
you were like super calm, and then all of a sudden you were so angry.
You don't get it until, because you telling me is different than experiencing it.
But you were almost done with the book, and you still weren't like, you hadn't, like, it doesn't occur to you yet.
Settle in.
You didn't realize, like, wait a second.
Yeah.
This is the end.
Yeah, and like reading it from that perspective, it's still, even though the ending's terrible, it's still really good journey through, you know, a well written fantasy series for that age demographic. Really well done. It just, the ending is just super disappointing.
And I think if it was completed like in its entirety the way it was intended, and we got some Asian mythology, which we really like, there's no Indian mythology, there's no like Chinese or Japanese mythology. There's a whole bunch of different mythologies that are missing from this. And I think if it was like 20 books, which I think was the original intention, I think this would have been like amazing, award-winning fantasy sci-fi.
I actually think it'll never happen. But
no one's finishing this.
No, not finished. Like, you'd have to, like, this is a series that actually I think could be totally redone, like totally remade, and actually be decent. Especially now that this age demographic, the young adult fiction, is the main thing people seem to be reading, because for some reason people's reading level, even like 40-year-olds are only reading up to that age, you know, level now. It's pathetic. But because that is true, I think there is an opportunity, and like, this is kind of a forgotten series. I actually think this is legitimately something that,
I feel like they do that with movies and TV. They don't do that with books. You don't redo
very rarely,
book
very
series.
rarely.
That's
But
weird.
this is the one that I think there is an opportunity there, where like this is like, this is really good and could have been a great legendary series, and I think there's an opportunity for it to come back and be that. But I don't even think they've even reprinted these. Like,
I've never seen a reprint of these.
The closest thing is like this is like volume 1 and 2 together. Like, this is back from when these were
as
out.
far as when I don't know for sure. I'm assuming this was just Scholastic in America. If you're in another country and you've seen these, let me know. But I think this is this was for Scholastic, and it was in Kmart, and that's all I've ever seen it. Like, I've never seen it anywhere else.
It wasn't like Animorphs, which had this wide net and was everywhere.
I think this was a much lower promo.
I never thought of that, actually. I'm curious to see like how international was this series, because some of these like are in like every country in the world. They're super popular, but
U.S. and Canada.
This feels like a less popular thing that maybe didn't cast a wide. But I'm actually curious to see if this was released in like Mexico and like Central America, like. I think
or
that
even
could
UK.
spread, or like, or that's all I was gonna say, or Europe, because like I don't feel like this would make it wider net than that. But I'm curious, did it make it at least to those regions?
If you've ever seen it and you're in
like,
another
are there?
country,
Because I haven't seen like even like a Spanish language version of this, but like, was there, or was it released in Mexico?
I've never seen any other versions besides these editions.
So if you're from so if you are from another country and you did get these and you let me know, because now that you mentioned that, I'm curious.
I always wondered, because there were no communities online that I saw.
Was there any international appeal? Is this one? Because sometimes with these, it's like strangely, like randomly, in Denmark, this is the #1 kids. You know, sometimes you get those where there's one country that like latches on. I'm curious about that. So definitely let us know below, and let us know your experience with this series and your thoughts, especially if you read it back in the day and you got to that ending, like you read it when it was fresh.
Yeah, that was traumatic, but. Let me know your favorite character, too.
Yeah. Thank you for...
General Davidus?
General Davidus. But, yeah, definitely thank you for joining us, and we like doing these. Check out our older videos. We did Goosebumps, Dead Time Stories. We like revisiting these. Benicula, we like revisiting these, especially from our childhood. A lot of fun, and we'll see you around.